Hello, here we are. So, Creakers, Tom Fletcher, chapter 26. Well, she just found out. She just found out that the king is her dad, might be her dad. Should we find out? Got them. The weird work of the wolf. Lucy opened her eyes. Her head swam dizzily, and her stomach was filled with an awful kind of emptiness. She was staring right into a pair of curious, beady, black eyes, which blinked at her and then looked up. "The kindling be alive, your rottenness!" announced Sniff. The king? Lucy's heart leapt as she remembered what had happened before she blacked out. She rolled slowly onto her side and sat up, wincing. "Dad?" she called out again, her voice wobbly with worry. The Creaker King stepped forward from his throne. Grunt, Guff, and Scratch were still hiding in the shadows behind his back, in fear of another beam of light breaking through.
"Why you be calling me that, kindling?"
the king said suspiciously. Lucy nervously took a step forward towards him, so she could see him better. Her knees trembled. There he was, as clear as crystal. It was her dad, all right, just different, changed, creakified. Lucy studied his new face of his. His ears were long and pointy like goblins, and his skin had turned a dark, wrinkly green. His head was bald, although it was bald before, so that wasn't any different, but now it was covered in big, lumpy moles. His nose was pointy, with a twisty, wiry hairs poking out. And in his ears she could see dirty globules of brown wax, like he hadn't washed his ears in years. But beneath all that, all the rottenness, Lucy knew it was her dad. His eyes still twinkled like magic, and on his left cheek there was a dimple, giving him away. "Dad, what happened to you?" Lucy whispered in shock, and took another step forward towards him, reaching out with her shaking hands, but the king backed away into the shadows.
"That's close enough. Is this another tricksy kindling?"
he demanded fiercely. "No, Dad, it's me, Lucy."
"Who?"
"Your daughter. Don't you remember?" Lucy said, tears beginning to stream in her cheeks. To stream down her cheeks. "Dad, you have to try to remember. You're not a creaker. At least you haven't always been one. You're a grown-up with a wife and a kindling. I mean, a kid. Me, Lucy, your Lucy Pops, remember?"
"Lucy Pops,"
the king repeated slowly, as though he remembered saying that word before. "Yes," Lucy cried. "That's what you and Mum always call me." She saw the Creakers shooting quick, nervous glances at each other.
"The kindlings be tricksing you, your rottenness,"
Grunt hissed.
"Best not listen to the tricksy thing,"
added Guff. "It's not a trick," said Lucy. "Dad, you disappeared months ago. You've just vanished. Everyone thought you'd left us, but I knew you wouldn't do that. Now I know what really happened." The Creakers all started fidgeting nervously. "You were snatched," Lucy's voice echoed around the cavernous room.
"Me? Snatched?"
the king scoffed. "Yes, Dad, but these four rotten things. By these four rotten things," Lucy pointed at Grunt, Guff, Scratch, and Sniff. "They snatched you and brought you down here. Who better to be their king than you, the man who knows rubbish better than anyone?" Lucy stared at her dad's new Creaker face. "You've been here so long, Dad, that this place has changed you, made you forget. It's turned you all backwards and different. But Dad, I can see you're still in there." Suddenly, another crack burst open in the floor, and a second streak of light shot into the cave. "Lucy!" Norman's voice soared up through the hole. Lucy stared down it. She could see into her world, and Norman waiting for her at the other end. "Dad, come back with me," Lucy pleaded.
"Now, you rottenness, this is all be tricks,"
Grunt said from his hiding place in the king's shadow. "It's not a trick, Dad," yelled Lucy, searching her brain for a way to make her dad remember. She stared at him, staring there in his dirty green work jacket. Then she suddenly remembered. What do you think she might use, or what she remembered about? Dad! Your coat pocket! She exclaimed. There's something in there. It's yours, remember? Slowly the king slid his long black creaker claw into the coat pocket and pulled out something small, shiny and silver. His harmonica. You used to play it for me every night, Lucy said hopefully. She gazed at the king's face, watching for any sign that he recognised the object. He held it out in the palm of his hand, staring at it, studying it. Trick! 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 The 4 naughty creakers chanted in the king's ear as he turned the silver harmonica around and saw his wretched reflection in its shiny surface.
What is this thing? This be too shiny and nice to be the Creakers' king. To be the Creakers' kings, he snapped. You be tricksing me, little kinder. I've never seen this before.
No, Lucy cried out as he tossed the harmonica through the air. It landed with a splash in what was once the flowing pink milkshake river, but was now a stream of mouldy, bubbling sludge. Lucy ran to the edge of the stream, but it was too late. The harmonica was gone, sinking deep into the mulch, along with all hope of freeing her dad from the creaker's spell. The bulb shook violently again, causing huge chunks of mould and festering rot to break away and crumble to dust. Lucy, it's really time to get out of there, Norman yelled through the hole from Whiffington, but Lucy didn't budge. I can't leave you behind. I won't lose you again, Dad, Lucy said through her teary eyes. Her vision must have been blurred, as for a moment she thought she saw a little green teardrop trickle down Sniff's cheek too. As the wolf collapsed around them, Grunt, Guff, Scratch and Sniff leapt for cover, shielding themselves from the falling debris anywhere they could. Grunt, Scratch, Sniff scuffled behind boulders, while a panicking Guff tried to bury himself in the mud. Sniff even dived headfirst into the mouldy river.
Look what you humans have done to our world, to our home, the Creaker King said, looking at his glorious rotting castle, which was beginning to tumble down, one silver dustbin at a time. We Creakers never wanted to!
But Lucy had stopped listening. Something had caught her eye. Something impossible. Something small. Something shiny. Dad's harmonica, she whispered, as she watched it rise out of the river, as though some sort of spell was bringing it back from the dead. Then she saw the 3 black claws clasped round it, and then a bony arm emerging from the mulch. Finally, Sniff's head appeared, and the creaker pulled himself silently out onto the bank of the river, soggy and damp and covered with slime. Sniff! Lucy gasped. The little creaker put one claw on his cracked lips and shook his head. Lucy glanced over to the pile of rubble and mud where Grunt, Gruff, Scratch were hiding. They were staring suspiciously at Sniff. Scratch spotted the harmonica. There it is in his hands. Scratch pointed it out to Guff. Guff pointed it out to Grunt. Grunt eyes narrowed in anger. But just as he was about to alert the king, Sniff plunged his claw back into the black pouch around his neck and blew his claw into the black pouch around his neck and blew a claw full of golden dozy dust into the air. The sleepy cloud of dust didn't float lazy this time. It shot like an arrow across the wall towards Grunt, Guff and Scratch. Thud! Thump! Blump! The 3 creakers fell fast asleep, instantly collapsing on the floor.
And that's why humans can never be trusted,
The king continued, pacing back and forth, avoiding the cracks appearing in the ground around him. Sniff creaked silently over to Lucy, and with a wet, trembling claw, handed her the harmonica. "Please help us," he said, his beady black eyes suddenly large and worried, so that he looked like a sad kitten. Lucy saw something in him she'd not seen in the Creakers before. Kindness. She took the harmonica, closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and started to play. Beautiful music suddenly filled every corner of the collapsing cave while she tried to remember Lucy's lullaby, the one her dad used to play to her every night. The king stopped talking. He froze on the spot, as though he could do nothing but listen to the music. As the notes reached the sleeping Creakers' pointy cabbage ears, they began coming round from the dozy dust spell, shaking off the slumber much faster than the humans. "Don't listen, you rotten ass!" they cried, scrunching up their faces as though the beautiful sound was hurting them. But the king couldn't help it. He was already caught in the music's magic. His cracked black lips was trembling. He was starting to remember. You've been turned to dust if you go back," Scratch said in a panicked voice. "Back! Back!" the king whispered, and Grunt shot Scratch an evil look for confirming the truth. Huge crystal teardrops formed in the corner of the king's eyes and began falling down his cheeks. Not tears of sadness, but of happiness. Happy tears, because every note Lucy played brought his human memories back to him. There's a picture of them. Music is more than just sound and noise, more than notes and melodies. Music can transport us to different places, change the way we feel, bring back people no longer with us. Music cannot be seen or touched. It has to be felt. And as the king felt it, his head was filled with images of Lucy laughing, playing and smiling, images of his wife and his home. These happy tears fell across his rotten skin, leaving a trail behind them. It was as though they were washing away the wicked work of the Wolb, and the disgusting creature he had become was melting at their touch. When Lucy finished playing, she opened her eyes. "Let's go home, Lucy Pops," her dad whispered. Chapter 27. She got her dad back. Cool. There we go. What's going to happen to the Creakers? Find out tomorrow.